This girl said that she played with a Ouija board and then she was haunted by a nun. This story is so terrifying. While I was reading it, I was like, what the hell is going on right now? So this girl's name is Courtney and she's from South Wales, United Kingdom, and she's 22 years old. So she said at this time she was really obsessed with the paranormal, very intrigued with it. And one of the reasons why is because unfortunately her mother had just passed away and she really wanted to contact her mother. It's important to note that Tiffany is very sensitive with energies, right? She's an empath and she's an intuitive. So her playing with the Ouija board wasn't a good idea in the first place, but again, she really wanted to talk to her mom. So one day, her and her friends decide that they're going to play with this Ouija board. She says that they start playing with the Ouija board and she immediately starts to feel this massive amount of dread, just negative energy. And of course, nothing happens while they're playing the Ouija board, she said, but she said that it was afterwards that was the real issue. So after they're done playing with the Ouija board and they say goodbye, she for some reason feels like she has opened a portal in her living room. She doesn't really know why, but she thinks that she has. So she decides that she's going to take the board and she's going to snap it in half and throw it in the garbage. This was a huge mistake. After she throws the Ouija board away, she later on that night goes to sleep and she's laying in bed and she wakes up in the middle of the night and she hears something and she's like, what is that noise? And she hears like this soft whispering and it's going, Tiffany, Tiffany. Now, she didn't really tell me what she did about this. I'm assuming that she just ignored it because she said that after this happened, it first started with whispering, but then the nights following after that, it became more persistent and a little bit louder. So it was saying, Tiffany, Tiffany. Well, this goes on for a little bit, long enough to make her feel like she's gonna have a breakdown because nobody believes her and nobody is listening to her. Well, one day, one of her best friends comes over. They're having a sleepover and they're both just on their phones, chilling in her bed. They're talking when suddenly they hear this. And this scratching noise. And then she hears, Tiffany. So Tiffany looks at her friend and her friend looks at her and Tiffany looks at her and goes, did you hear that? Please tell me you heard that. Her friend's like, yeah, I heard that. Now, apparently her friend had had sleep paralysis quite often and had experiences with spirits herself. So this didn't really bother her that much, but her friend did make her swap sides of the bed. She didn't want to sleep next to the wall because that's where they heard the scratching noise. So they swapped sides. Now, Tiffany said that at this point, things really did start to scare her because she didn't know how to protect herself and she was terrified. And she knew that spirits had fed off of fear, but she didn't know how to stop being scared. This is where things got even worse. Her head started to burn, like her scalp started to burn really bad. She said that it felt like there was a sunburn on her head and that hair started to fall out. Now, she said that this actually got so bad that it progressed to the point where she started to feel like she had a sunburn everywhere. She had it on her knees, her ankles, her elbows, everywhere she felt like she had a sunburn. She finally went and told her grandparents because she was so scared, and her grandparents took her to a church. So they go to the church and the church is closed. So they go to another church, that church is closed. They try all these churches and all the churches are closed. And so at this point she's feeling completely hopeless because she is sitting in the car, and as she is sitting in the car, her head is still burning and she can feel this thing touching her hair. And not only is it touching her hair, but it's like tugging on it. So she's feeling pretty hopeless at this point, and they decide that they're obviously going to go back home. They have no other choice. So she goes upstairs and she needs to wrap a towel around her head at this point because she is so sick of this thing touching her hair. So she goes to grab a charger and she wraps a towel around her head. Well, as she is walking towards her grandparents' room where she's going to sleep because she's not sleeping by herself, something grabs the towel and yanks it off of her head. She is hysterical at this point. So she runs down the stairs and she goes to talk to her nan and she's like, something is happening to me. I don't know what's happening to me. And her nan is like, listen, we're just going to pray for you. So they all start to pray together, right? But at this point, she is still burning hot. And then she starts to feel something on her leg and it's hurting. So she pulls up her pants, and right where she pulls up her pants on her right leg is 3 long scratch marks on her right leg. This is where it gets really bad, okay? So they get done praying and they all go to bed. So she's laying in bed and she is trying to fall asleep when she hears it again. Tiffany. Tiffany. Now, she's so scared at this point that she just grabs a pillow and she just puts it over her head. Now, mind you, she is sleeping next to her nan, right? So she's sleeping next to her nan. She has this pillow over her head when suddenly she feels something get on the bed and it slowly starts crawling on top of the bed. Then it crawls on top of her, over her, and then suddenly it just stops. And she's like, okay, I'm good. Maybe it left me alone. When 5 minutes later, her nan just shoots up and just goes, this point, Tiffany realizes that the spirit had done something to make her grandmother cough. And if you can think of what the spirit did, I can't say it, but like, what would you physically do to someone to make them like lose air, right? Now it gets into the scariest part, because now is the part where she sees whatever this is that is haunting her. Her and her friends go to a hotel room one night. They decide that they're gonna have a couple of drinks. Well, Tiffany at this point decides that she's gonna go take a shower. Well, as she's in the shower, she's opening up the shower, right? And she gets in. She then hears Tiffany again. And she slowly turns around behind her for some reason. Nothing's there. So at this point, she's like, okay, I need to sit down. I need to calm down. I cannot deal with this anymore. I have to not panic. I have to not show fear. So she just sits down on the toilet. And where she's sitting on the toilet, she can see the reflection of the shower in the mirror. But she's not looking at the mirror yet. She's looking at the floor. She then slowly looks up into the mirror, and she sees a nun standing in the shower staring at her. Now, Tiffany legit feels fear through her entire body at this point, but she is like, I have to stop letting this thing scare me. I have to do something about this. So she takes up all the courage she can in her entire body, and she turns around and runs towards that shower. She whips it all the way open, and there's nothing there. She said at this point that fear kind of took over again, and so she just runs out of the bathroom. But as she's running out of the bathroom, she kind of glances in the mirror again, and there is the nun again, and it just goes, Tiffany. She said that that night she absolutely could not sleep, and that this scared her so badly. She says that she still deals with this to this day, that she still will hear her name being whispered constantly, and that she still will feel things crawling on top of her as she sleeps, and that she reads the Bible every single night. She reads Psalms 91 every single day. She wears a cross necklace every single day, and things have gotten a little bit better, but she still has sleepless nights, and she does not know what to do because she's absolutely terrified. By the way, her real name is Courtney, but I did not see that she didn't wish to be anonymous until the end of the story. Unfortunately, I don't know how I missed that part, but she doesn't wish to be anonymous. Her real name is Courtney. She said to let everybody know, do not play with the Ouija board. You never know what you could let in, and it's terrifying her, and it could terrify you for the rest of your life. So I am going to tag her below because she did say that she wanted to be tagged, and she also wants to know if you guys have any advice for her. What do you think this is? Because I do not think that was a nun. Obviously, we think we know what this is. Yeah, I can't say the word, but I think obviously we know what this is, because this is pretty bad. This is a pretty bad haunting. I mean, you're going through a lot. You're getting physically touched. You're like, you know, I can't even say what's happening to you, but you know what's happening to you. I said it in the story. Not nice things. So not nice things are happening to you. I definitely think that this is what you think it is. And I think that you definitely need to seek professional help from a clergy or whatever your culture, I don't know what your culture is, but go seek a shaman, a clergy, something that can help you kind of work through this, or maybe even be exercised in some way. I don't know, I'm not a professional, I shouldn't be giving you that professional advice, but definitely something to help you, because this sounds kind of unsafe. Drop all your opinions, suggestions, and comments below, but please, as always, be respectful, because she is scared, and this is something scary that's happening to her.
Let's read some scary stories about skinwalkers. Yes, I'm going to say the word for the video. That being said, I claim no negative energy from these stories, from this video. Yes, I have the lights on. I have the volume on the TV on just for some background noise. Anyway, I found some stories on Reddit, and the last one is probably the best one. My grandmother on my mother's side has always been very superstitious. For lack of a better word, she's not religious, but she does believe in a lot of paranormal stuff. Her mother was full-blooded Navajo and her father was Irish. Either way, she'd never been anywhere east of Montana, and she grew up in Nevada. One year when I was in grade school, we went to visit her. Most of the visit was pretty uneventful, typically boring old people stuff, except she always kept her curtains drawn shut and would always peek out the window, and when someone asked what she was doing, she would simply reply, "Yenel Delushi is watching me." This went on nearly for the entire visit, until a few days before we were due to leave. My grandma and my baby brother were in the front yard that evening, planting flowers, when all of a sudden, my grandmother starts shouting at my baby brother, "Stay away from that creature, it's not safe." Of course, being in Nevada, we all assumed that my baby brother found a scorpion or a rattlesnake, so we all run outside to see my grandmother clutching my little brother and shaking in terror against the side of the house. Standing out in the yard was a large black Great Dane-sized dog. It was staring at my grandmother with intensity I'd never seen before. It looked up at us, gave a little huff, and bounded off. I don't remember if it moved unusually fast or not, but do remember it had really deep yellow eyes. When my mother asked my grandmother what had happened, she kept repeating, "The Yenel Delushi has found me." She moved a couple weeks after that. So this happened about 12 years ago. My family owns a farm in the heart of an Indian reservation. One winter, I was home for Christmas taking care of the farm while my parents were away Christmas shopping. As I was home by myself, and way late in the night, I hear all of the cows start freaking out. I knew it had to be the wild dogs that are rampant in the area, so I throw on some boots and head out to the field. This was a perfect scenario for a horror movie. It was cloudy, but there was a full moon, and it was breaking through the clouds just right to light up all of the snow. I ran out into the middle of the field. Just in time, I see two dogs. They were standing up facing each other and fighting. So I pump a shell into the chamber of my 12 gauge, and then it happened. The two dogs heard the rack. They both stopped, looked over at me, and ran away on their back legs. Immediately I froze, and every ghost story about skinwalkers and all the other native legends I grew up with flew through my mind. This didn't happen to me, but happened to my uncle. He is Mexican and Native American. This happened in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. He was driving around with his girlfriend late at night, and they saw something that looked like a huge black dog on the side of the road. He slowed down, and the dog began crossing the road. Instead of walking like a normal dog would, this thing moved like a toy rocking horse. He said it stopped in the middle of the road and stared right at them, and its eyes had a red glow. My uncle is the most badass person I know, and it scared the crap out of him. Back in 2019, I went on a missions trip with my old church's youth group to Montana. We went on a Native American reservation for 2 to 3 weeks. It was right before I started my freshman year of high school, and everyone was around that age, and it was getting close to sundown, and we had decided to play manhunt. The area of the reservation we were on had an open field that was surrounded by the woods, and I decided to go as far as I could. I was hiding, and I heard one of my friends who was on my team calling my name, and it sounded far away but in the opposite direction of our camp setup. So I started going towards them, and I kept hearing it, but it constantly sounded further away. I kept going until I saw a decrepit deer. I was about 150 yards away from our camp at this point and turned around and booked it without looking back. By the time I got back to camp, I saw everyone chilling, doing their own thing, and I went up to the person who I heard calling me, and they said that they had stopped playing 10 minutes before I came back, and they just thought I was in the bathroom at one of the porta potties the whole time. I had an old friend who was a skeptic, but for whatever reason, he seemed to believe in skinwalkers. Turned out, he lived in a pretty big hotspot for them as a kid and had other childhood friends who had extreme experiences. I had gone over to his place relatively late one night, and we got to talking about creepy shit. He mentioned that one of his childhood friends couldn't mention the word, or she would apparently start vomiting without fail. I thought nothing of it and moved the conversation along. Around 2 to 3 a.m., he wanted to go smoke by the river near his apartments. At one point, he's talking about something traumatic and starts to sing for whatever reason. Meanwhile, I'm looking across this river towards the other side of the street and see a giant dog running down the path with no owner and no collar. I tell my friend, and he sees it too. It looks at us and suddenly shifted into what looked like a hairless dog, and then into a mountain lion with bent legs, and then into a fully shaped naked person on all fours, but its face was completely mangled. We both started running back to the apartments, and we watched this thing track us through the bushes with glowing eyes and the cracking of branches. We got back to the apartment, and we were absolutely floored and shaken up. Bro had no idea how to process it, especially since he was high. One of the creepiest things I've seen for a while, and I'll never forget it. I'm scared now.
Do y'all know why all of Chicago calls the West Side out West Illinois? It's because that's a whole different world out there. Ain't no telling what you gonna find in out West Illinois. I can actually tell you that it's a whole lot of supernaturals that's in out West Illinois. Like the man-eater. It's a whole cryptid that's out there sucking up the men, and not in a way that's enjoyable. Come on, my babies, it's story time. Boom, boom, it's story time. Boom, boom, paranormal Chicago activity with Cat G. There has always been some type of news around a serial killer in Chicago. But see, the thing is that yes, there are serial killers in Chicago. However, a few of them are supernatural. One of them is a female entity. She comes out like 3 or 4 times a year. And in these 3 or 4 times, she always takes the soul of 3 different men. I had a little boo thing that lived on Laramie. Well, he lived by Laramie and Adam. One night, they had a house party. And it had got so late and I was drunk. And his mama and his daddy was like, no, you're not going outside. It's too late. You can stay here for some. Okay, cool. No problem. Because I'm too drunk anyway. I don't need to be getting on no public transportation the way that I am. So me and him sitting in his backyard, right? And we get to smoke. We hear something rustling in the bushes that's a little ways away from. Both of us instantly stop talking and we look over to the side. Whatever it was that was in the bushes stopped moving. Shaking it off. You know what? It ain't nothing. It's probably just some little creature. Whatever. We get to talking again. Next thing you know, something is moving in the other bushes on the other side of the yard. Now, see, here's the thing. Ain't no way for something to be in them bushes if they was just in these bushes over here and we didn't see it cross. One set of bushes is way over here on this fence. The other set of bushes is way across the yard on this side of the fence. Ain't no way something ran across the yard and we did not see it. There is no way for it to like run around the perimeter of the yard and we didn't see it. It's only 2 sets of bushes in this backyard, okay? I'm starting to get the willies. Like for real, for real. Goosebumps is forming. Hairs is starting to stand. For a minute, we quiet. And then he snapped his head to me. He said, what you just said? I ain't say nothing. What you talking about? He said, if you want me, you ain't got to play these mind games. We could just go upstairs. Whoa. Where'd that just come from? He like, I just heard you say that you ready to get this over with and go to this beach. Absolutely not, sir. I didn't say that. He said, well, then you was thinking it. Absolutely not, sir. I wasn't thinking it. You want to know what I was thinking? I'm way too drunk and I'm smoking this blunt. It's making the flow look like it is moving away from me, bitch. I feel like I am sitting on a goddamn pedestal and if I make one move, I'm going to fall and I'm going to crash like Humpty Dumpty. Now, here's something crazy. His mama got wind chimes. She got 5 different sets of wind chimes to be exact. It's only one wind chime that is going off. And it ain't no wind blowing. I look up when I tell you it's a blue wind chime. It's got a blue house and it's got silver little dangly thingies to make the noise. And it's got pretty little blue flowers and crystals all through. I'm talking about it look like somebody is shaking this motherfucker. His mama get to screaming his name. This not his real name. Y'all are weird, so I'ma just use him random. Antoine! Antoine! Get your ass in the house, Antoine! Hurry up! We think it's something wrong. We haul ass, go in the house, slam the door shut. We go find her, she in her little study room. She said, what I tell you about sitting out there this weekend? You're not supposed to be outside this weekend. You got to be in the house with all the doors and the windows closed. What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about? Why he got to be in the house with the windows and the doors closed? I am now sober, bitch. Spill it. His daddy come around the corner from out the kitchen talking about some, yeah, the man eater gonna get your ass. You better stay your ass in the house. The man eater, ho! Come and explain, old man. That man said once upon a time it was a clan of witches that used to run out west Illinois. And that clan of witches got done real dirty by a group of regular schmegular niggas. See, them regular schmegular niggas knew about the book of Enoch and how humans went and had babies with the supernaturals or the angels, whichever one you want to call. And they created demigod humans, right? So these regular schmegular men out west figured out that this group of women were covens, and they made it their business to infiltrate this coven, to like get with them, make them fall in love, make them give the men powers, and then they was just gonna do away with the women. Most of the coven wasn't going for it. They knew what was going on except for this one witch. She decided that she was gonna give this man an actual trial because she actually had feelings for him. Like she had grew up watching this boy. You know what I'm saying? This is like that girl who went to grammar school and high school with a boy and he never noticed her, and now all of a sudden they grown and he see her and he like, oh damn, I ain't never noticed you, girl, come here. And she's like, yes, I'm here now, bitch, come get me. She was riding her high horse, right? She said he finally picked me. Did not know that he was playing her ass. For a few weeks, everything was going good. He started coming over to her house, something that she don't normally do and something that she not supposed to do. She not supposed to really have nobody in her inner sanctum because we not gonna get into that. A witch's home is a whole temple, and if you ain't the right spirit to go in a house, baby, you gonna get fucked up. But she let down her guards and her wards and let the man come in. Now she tell him, look, I'm a witch. This is what I do. You finna see some shit. You need to chill out. If you can't handle it, I'ma wipe you clean, and it's gonna be as if we never did. He go in the house, he freaked the fuck out. But you know what? He on a mission. He want these powers. So he finna do whatever he can to get these powers. And what do he got to do? He got to woo her. And see, this is the problem with most men. Because most of them really don't be liking that woman. They just like something that woman can provide for them. So he put on his acting hat and he was the best boyfriend for 6 months. He waited 6 months because he found out that the full moon is when their powers are the strongest. And this is when she can grant him the powers that he want the best. Her coven members is trying to warn her, watch. Once the time come around, that man gonna pop up and all he gonna keep on asking for is powers. When can he get powers? How is it gonna work? Is she really gonna do it? Because that's all that man worried about. And sis was like, no, that's my man. He loves me. We ain't got to worry about none of that. Mind your business. But she should have listened. She should have. The closer they get to the full moon, the more he is like really in tune with her. He asking more questions. He's paying more attention. She decides, you know what? I'm gonna call him out. Because now it's too much. Every time you talk to me, it's something about these motherfucking powers. You wasn't never like this when we was first together. I don't understand why you like. So she hangs a bundle of herbs over a threshold of a door. As she walks through it, she tell him to walk. This is now a sanctum of truth telling. Whoever walks through this doorway with these herbs above it is now compelled to tell the truth. So she turned around, she said, let me ask you a question. Why you want to know about the full moon and the ritual so much? And it just come out his mouth like word vomit. Oh, duh, bitch, I want you to make me into a warlock. He slapped his hand over his mouth. She was like, right. So this whole entire time, you was just doing this shit so you could get powers up out of me? And he was like, yeah, because who the fuck really finna date a witch? You don't think everybody out here know what the fuck y'all do? Again, he slapped his hand over his mouth. He say, man, what the fuck is going on? She pick up a bottle of some type of bluish green liquid. She throw it at his feet. She say a couple of words. She said, you bind it here. You ain't never fucking leave. He look at her. He said, look, bitch, you on bullshit. I'm about this motherfucker. Turn around, walk to the door. He opens up the door and he tries to walk through it and runs into an invisible. Knocked him on his ass. She looked at him and she said, until a man do right by me, you will be trapped here for eternity. Being loved properly drove her mad. Every man that came out to her were bad men. None of them had good intentions for women. And she thought, why would I allow y'all to still walk this earth and tarnish other women like you did me? So now every full moon she goes out and she hunts for bad men. You know, a man from out west who used to do women super dirty, and then out of nowhere he just came up missing, like can't nobody find him, ain't nobody heard no word from him. Sis got
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of this lady who got married to this man and found out that he turns into a snake at night. My grandma always says you will never truly know a person unless you get married to them. And even with that, like some details will be left out until they actually die. That's when you'll find out what kind of person they were. But in this case, this lady found out after she got married what kind of person she got married to. So y'all, this was my grandmother's friend's daughter, and she hated men for the life of her. Growing up, I really didn't understand because, you know, I thought, I mean, they're cool people. Until I understood the story when I was older and my grandma told me what happened. So, baby girl started dating this man from the time that they were in high school. Girl stayed in the village. Guy went to varsity or whatever, and they broke up for some time, and then they got back together. When they got back together, it was probably like 7-8 years later, and honey, man was loaded. Like, she just genuinely thought that this man had businesses or whatever. And you know, he got back to her and said, hey, you're the girl for me. I want us to get back together. I want us to get married because I love you. Girl was like, yes, sure, because obviously that was still the love of her life. I mean, they dated for a long time in high school and they broke up because one went to varsity and the other didn't. This had been going on for years and she didn't know. Mind you, people in his family were dying like mysteriously each and every year. At a certain time, a family member just dies. One day, she decides that she's gonna clean the house for herself. She's like, this thing just came to her that she should just clean the house, right? Mind you, when she got married to this guy wanted her to be a housewife. If she wanted to work, she could work, but he wanted to be a housewife and he didn't want her to clean, he didn't want her to do anything. She decides to spring clean the house for some reason, a big ass house. She starts from the main bedroom and she starts cleaning. As she's cleaning, she looks under the bed. Under the bed is just piles and piles of money, right? There is just piles and piles of money. And she's like, wait, what the hell? What's going on here? What is... You get? So she continues cleaning, guys. She goes into the wardrobes as well. Under the clothes, under the folded clothes, money. Okay, she continues cleaning the house and she found money in cupboards. She found money in each and every single bed. She found money. Under the bed, she found money. Some money was cut. Some money was like, yeah, she just found money, okay? And now she's questioning herself. And then she opens this other spare bedroom. In that spare bedroom, she looks under the bed as well. And she had stopped cleaning at this point. She just started searching. You understand? She looks under the bed. There is a bottle. A spare bedroom, there is a bottle. And this bottle is filled with water. And inside, there is a lizard. Dirty water, mind you. Inside there's a lizard that's living and it's just running around. So everything starts to make sense to her, right? Fast forward, it's dinner time. The people are back, right? Shapo, she sits inside the house. Oh, they're eating whatever. And now she remembers that every single time after dinner, the husband always tells her, oh, we watched TV, oh, we did this. And she just used to believe him for some reason. Because she's like, every time they ate dinner, she remembered nothing. The following day, she remembers nothing after that dinner that she had. Now that she's suspecting her husband, you best believe she goes to a sangoma to help her. Because she goes to a person and she's like, hey man, something is happening in my house. And this guy is like, do you really want to see what's actually happening at your house at night? He's like, yeah, I want to see. He's like, okay. Take this thing, put it under your pillow. Even before you do anything, even before you eat that man's dinner, take this thing and put it under your pillow. And she's like, you have to use it for 7 days straight. After the 7 days, you're going to come back here so that I can explain. Sharp. She takes the thing, she puts it under her pillow. Day 1, she says she dreamt of this guy, man. She dreamt of this guy turning into a snake, right? She's like, this guy was on top of her. And she started feeling him. And she's like, wait, hold on. This is not human skin. Now, it's day 2. Nah? This time after dinner, all of a sudden, she doesn't fall asleep, right? And the husband asked her, like, aren't you tired? She's like, no, I'm not tired. Why? He's like, oh, no, I'm just asking, wabo. She takes the plates and puts them in the sink or whatever. And as she reaches to grab the dishwashing soap, because she was like, no, it's fine. She's going to wash the dishes. Just the maid should just leave. And as she reaches to grab the dishwashing soap, the maid stops her, like, really quickly, like, no, madam. Like, it's okay. I don't want you doing anything. Like, I just want you to be the queen. Hey. And she's like, okay, no problem. She sits down, she watches TV. As she's watching TV, this man is looking at her like, aren't you going to sleep? She's like, Aibo, why would I go to sleep at freaking 8 p.m. or like 7 p.m.? What are you talking about? She's like, no, I'm not tired. Time goes by, they're looking at her, she's still not sleeping. Shapo, at around 11 p.m, she's like, she wants to go to sleep. Her husband is like, yeah, sure, like, you go to sleep and I'll follow you. She's like, no, I want us to cuddle. The guy's like, no, I don't want us to cuddle. Like, just making excuses, you understand? She's like, hey, okay, fine, it's fine. Because he's like, he wants to finish this movie and then he's gonna come cuddle with her. She goes to sleep, guys, and she waits for her husband. She eventually passes out. As she passes out, she hears the car running and the guy leaves. How? She's like, okay, sharp. She sleeps. Day 3, same thing happens. She doesn't sleep at the time that they're used to her sleeping. And she sleeps at 11 p.m. This time she's like, no, man, I want to see where this guy is going. She stays up until he comes back. When he comes back with a lady. And he takes this lady to the spare room and they do whatever they were doing. So she's like, she heard this lady scream. And as she's hearing this girl scream, she's just quiet this whole time. Because remember, the Sangoma that she went to told her that whatever you hear, whatever you see, whatever you dream of, you must not say anything to anyone. You must not tell your husband anything. So she kept quiet. So as the days go by, like things keep on accumulating and just accumulating, and she's writing every single thing down. Day 7 comes through and she goes back to the Sangoma. She tells the Sangoma about all the things that she saw, and the Sangoma's like, yeah, your husband is a ritualist. Your husband got a snake way before he got married to you, and guess what? The snake liked you. One, you're never gonna have kids. Any kids that you become pregnant of now is going to be eaten by that snake. And if you get pregnant, by the time you reach 8 months, that baby's just going to be gone in your stomach. Each and every single time that you get pregnant, 8 months, the baby gone. And she's like, yeah, no, she recalls there was a time where she got pregnant twice, and at close to 9 months, she lost the first baby. And then close to after 8 months, and then going to 9 months, like 8 months and 2 weeks, if that makes sense, she lost the baby again. And she was scared to try again, and the husband was like, it's okay. She's like, yeah, your husband knows what he's doing. Number 2, the husband turns into a snake. So when he went to go get that particular snake, that snake chose you to be his wife. It's not like he came back because he loved you so much. He's just using you for his rituals. Also, he's not allowed. You're never gonna have kids because he used you in the ritual as well. Number 2, he turns into a snake. That snake wants to sleep with women, so that his wealth can grow. What else? Oh, the bottle that's under the bed that you saw with a lizard inside. Basically, that's what pulls people's luck. When that lizard dies, he has to sacrifice something so that he can get another lizard, puts it under the bed, and he does that for 365 days. The Sangoma is like, you've been married to this man for so long. How did you not notice? Because every single time after dinner, there is something that they put in your food so that you pass out. And he's going to tell you things that happened yesterday, which didn't even happen. You just slept at 7 p.m. At 7 p.m. and woke up the next day at 8 a.m. Because everybody's in on it. She's like, the security guards know. The maid knows. Every single person that works in that yard knows. She's like, everybody knows except you, because he pays them a great deal of money to keep his secret. And he's like, for all of these things to happen, he went to go to a Sangoma so that whatever he says, you just believe it. He could literally be cheating on you and you would believe when he says, sorry, it was a mistake, you didn't even see it. She's like, also the family members that keep dying. She's like, remember, when his family members that have power finish, who do you think is going to start attacking? Your family members. And so after finding out all of these tragedies, she wanted to go and expose this man. And unfortunately for her, the man had already found out that she's been going to see someone, and this guy made her blind, mute, sick. For years, she was bedridden, and he was the only person that was taking care of her, only so that she could not expose his secret. And eventually she got saved, y'all. She got saved by her mom. She went back home. She's doing better now, but she will never be the same again. Shame. She hates men. She never wants to see a man in her life again because she doesn't trust y'all. Be careful.
My mom passed away. It was very hard on the family, and I had not experienced grief or loss before. So I ended up falling into some bad habits. I dreamt about her in the first few months, where I would be having a completely different dream, and then it would shift, and she would be there, and I would hold her and tell her how I missed her. It was a comfort, and I truly believed she was coming to actually visit me. These dreams stopped for years, and if I did dream of her, it would be a normal dream where she was in the background. And eventually, I stopped having dreams with her in them altogether. At one point, I'm living alone in this small apartment, and all of a sudden, I started seeing these dark shadows on the top corners of my bedroom walls. It was a regular room, my bed in the middle, door to my left. As I'm laying there, I see something dark, kind of sliding down the wall. These shadows didn't have a form, honestly looked like black vapor. I would think to myself, oh, maybe it's coming from outside. maybe the glare from my phone, or the moon, etc. But at this point, I had been living here long enough to know that this was definitely different. At this time, I started having terrifying sleep paralysis. I would dream of those shadow vapor things coming down my wall and feeling something on top of me that I couldn't see. And all I could do was move my eyes and try to mouth El Padre Nuestro. Eventually, I would wake up shaking and go to the living room and watch something for the rest of the night. This went on for a few weeks. I would sleep with a cross. I would pray before bed, and it kept happening. I would go maybe 2 days with peace, and then it would be back. No activity anywhere else. One night, I was in the middle of one of these dreams, and I was terrified, trying to mouth a prayer, but I couldn't say it. Like, I couldn't remember the words to it. Then, all of a sudden, my door slams open, and it was my mom. She was standing there in her favorite mandil, apron, holding a broom. And Daisy, she went to work. She started smacking the wall next to her, screaming in Spanish, "Órale, hijos de su madre, se me salen de aquí, váyanse a la..." Translating roughly to "get out of here, you sons of..." She was smacking the walls with the broom and saying all of this. And I kid you not, I saw these vapor shadow things go towards the open door. I still couldn't move, just moving my eyes from her to the shadows and back. These things went out the door, and she gave me one last look and slammed the door shut. When the door slammed, I woke up after not having seen her in my dreams for years and seeing her for that brief glimpse. I was bawling my eyes out, and I just kept thinking her over and over. When I tell you, I have not experienced those dreams since, either I have gotten better at protecting myself, or she really came back one last time to protect me.
They found more than 10,000 charred human bone fragments all across his 18 acres of estate. Every single state in the US has had at least one serial killer, if not multiple. Today I'm telling you guys about the most notorious serial killer from Indiana. If you're new to my page, this is a map of all the states I've covered so far. We are in the final 15 states. So today I'm going to tell you guys about Herbert Richard Baumeister, and he goes by Herb, so that's what I'm going to call him in this story. So Herb was born in Indianapolis on April 7th of 1947, and he was the oldest child. He had 3 siblings. He had a fairly normal childhood, honestly. Like, his dad was a doctor, so they lived comfortably. There wasn't really much out of the ordinary, and Herb seemed like a normal kid. But as he got to, like, his teen years, he started to exhibit a little bit more, like, aggressive and antisocial behavior. First off, he started telling his friends he wanted to know what human urine tasted like. So that's insane. And then he also started peeing on the teachers' desks and in his classroom. And then he started playing with dead animals, which is something we see with a lot of serial killers in their youth, unfortunately. And his father, remember, he's a doctor, he knew something was off as he's getting into his teen years. He's like, something is not right. My kid should not be playing with dead animals. And so he ends up getting him mentally evaluated, and he gets diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and antisocial personality disorder. But after that, he didn't receive any treatment. So he got a diagnosis, but no help. So that's really weird. In 1965, after graduating high school, he tries to go to college, but he ends up dropping out and he gets a series of odd jobs instead. Eventually, he starts dating and he gets married to a woman named Juliana Sater. She goes by Julie, and they get married in November of 1971. In their time being married, they seem relatively normal, honestly, like from the outside, like nothing really seems odd about them. They end up having 3 kids together, but Julie, years later, tells the police that in their 25 years of marriage, they only were intimate with each other and had 6 times in 25 years. And she says that she's never seen him nude. Like, she's never seen her husband nude, even though they were intimate a couple times. And I'm so sorry to say this, but all I can think of when I hear that is Tobias from Arrested Development being a never nude. That's all I can think about. So I feel like now all I can picture is Tobias and his little cutoffs. Anyways, going back to the story, him and Julie, they live a pretty normal life. He did get some mental help at one point for about 2 months. Julie said that he was hurting and struggling and he just needed the mental help. And so he seems normal. He even eventually, after getting some mental help, he opens up his own thrift store chain, and it ends up being pretty successful. He was a family man that worked a lot. Every once in a while he'd exhibit like a little bit of odd behavior, but nothing that like would have really stood out. It just seemed like he was a quirky guy, not a serial killer or someone harming people. In May of 1988, Herb ended up buying an 18
14-acre farm, and it was called Fox Hollow Farm. And he owned it for years, but at one point, 6 years after he bought the property, his son is playing in the backyard in the woods, and he finds a human skeleton, a complete human skeleton partially buried in the backyard. That's not something you normally find when you're a kid playing in your yard. And he tells his mom about this, and she's obviously horrified, and she tells Herb. And Herb, instead of being freaked out by a human skeleton in the backyard like a normal person, he goes, "Oh no, don't worry about it. I already knew it was there." Huh? He says that his dad, since he was a doctor, it was like his practice skeleton. And so his dad used to practice on the skeleton, and he had stored it in the shed, and then Herb decided to bury it. Nothing about that story makes any sense. Why would his dad, who's a doctor, store a skeleton in a shed? If he's using this to practice, he would take good care of it. He would find value in this human body that he is practicing on. He wouldn't just discard it in his shed for the kids to find. And also, then why would you bury it? Nothing makes sense, but Julie takes this as an answer, and they go about living their life. But 2 years later, in 1996, police come knocking on the door saying that they're investigating a string of deaths in the area of Indianapolis, and they think Herb could be involved. So they ask to search the property, but both Herb and Julie say absolutely not, and the police are pretty sure that he's a killer, but they need to get a warrant. They can't just search this when they say no. So they leave, they get a warrant, and they come back, and they search his property, and they find a ton of incriminating things. Before I get into that, I'm going to tell you guys about the string of killings that's happening and why they think that Herb is the person killing them. So we're going to go all the way back to 1980, which is 8 years before he purchased the farm. Herb would have been 33 in 1980, by the way. The body of a 15-year-old male S worker, his name was Michael Sean Petrie, was discovered naked in Hamilton County in Indiana. And Michael had been known to mostly work around gay bars in the area, and he had been reported missing 9 days before he was discovered, and he hadn't been seen for almost 12 days. It sounds like a couple of people saw him last in the city in a stranger's car. No one knew who he was with. And at the time, his death seemed like an individual instance. They do investigate, but at the time they don't get any answers. They can't figure out who did this to this 15-year-old. It wasn't until 2 years later, on July 21st of 1982, that the body of Maurice Allen Taylor, who was 22, was found in a creek nearby in Indiana. Investigators thought that he had been strangled, but the autopsy couldn't conclusively say either way. They did say that it seemed like it was a possibility. And Maurice also was living on the street and often frequented the gay bars downtown for work. So now we're noticing a little bit of a pattern already. And then 3 months later, on October 3rd of 1982, by the way, that's a big leap to go from a 2-year difference between victims to a 3-month difference. That is very scary. So they discover 14-year-old Delvoyd Lee Baker, who was found partially nude near a river. Again, I said 14 years old. Police investigate his death and canvass and ask if there's any witnesses, and a couple people come forward and say that they saw him the night before downtown in Indianapolis, and they saw him getting in a blue van. It was driven by a young white guy with a mustache. And his parents told the police that he had said he was going to go ride his bike into the city, and he even called them at 10:30 p.m. that night saying he was going to be at home late because he wanted to go see a movie. And so police are thinking that maybe this guy lured him. Some guy picked him up, offered to take him to the movies. He thought it was great, and then he took him and killed him. However, 3 months into their investigation, police learned he actually had been the victim of SA and possible S trafficking, and he was often at gay bars downtown. So that's the third victim that's frequenting gay bars downtown. We're picking up on like a real pattern here. So we know whoever's doing this is using these gay bars as their hunting ground. They are targeting gay men and gay S workers, which means that possibly our perpetrator is gay themselves. 7 months later, on May 28th of 1983, 22-year-old Michael Andrew Mick Riley disappeared after going to the Vogue Theater, which was a nightclub in downtown Indianapolis, and he was last seen with an unidentified man that he left the bar with. His body was found the next month, June 4th, and the autopsy stated that he was strangled with a towel. 4 men or children, all strangled, all known to be around the gay bars downtown. The police are realizing they have a serial killer on their hands at this point. 2 years later, at this point, they still have very minimal leads or suspects. On May 7th of 1985, a 17-year-old, his name is Eric Allen Rodiger, vanished from the area in Indiana, and a few days later his body was discovered in Ohio. So now we're crossing state lines. According to Eric's parents, he was supposed to be going to a bunch of interviews for a summer job, but when the police asked around and went and followed up with all of these potential job interviews, they all said that he never made it. And at this point, the police are thinking that this is a pattern. So they're assuming that Eric is gay, or at least around gay bars quite often. But his family and friends insisted that he was not gay, and it seems like he didn't go to any of the bars downtown. However, they later discovered that he had some acquaintances who were drug dealers or S-workers in the area and were gay, and so it seems like he probably met whoever the serial killer was through one of his friends. And police also had witnesses say that he was last seen that morning waiting at the bus stop, but then ended up getting in someone's car instead of getting on the bus. But they didn't get a description of the guy in the car. Eric's body was not only found with strangulation marks from a rope, he also had been burned. He had burn marks on his body, which means that he is escalating as well. On August 15th of 1986, another body is discovered. It was a male in his 20s to 30s. He was found in a ditch in Ohio in nothing but his underwear. He was strangled with a rope, but he wasn't identified until 3 years later. He started using fingerprinting technology, and they were able to identify him as 29-year-old Michael Allen Glenn, who lived in a trailer park near Indianapolis. And he took a victim from Indiana and then dumped them in Ohio. That's the second one he's done this to so far. On October 15th of the following year, 21-year-old James Boyd Robbins Jr. went missing shortly after leaving his mom's house. He disappeared sometime around 10 p.m. We obviously don't know exactly when. 2 days later, on October 17th, his naked body was found. Police canvassed. They asked if there's any witnesses, and one person said that they saw a red Jeep Wrangler Renegade near the crime scene, but another person said it wasn't a red Jeep, it was actually a Chevrolet Blazer. So we just don't really know, and unfortunately, nothing really came up from this lead as well. We're just hitting dead end after dead end, and even though more bodies are showing up, there's still little to no evidence or leads to get us any closer to finding out who's killing all of these people. 2 years later, on August 12th of 1989, the body of 26-year-old Stephen Lynn Elliott was found in Ohio. He was also wearing nothing but underwear, and it was clear that he had been strangled. It was clear he was connected to all of these other murders. Stephen's father told the police that his son had come out as gay in 1979, and he was also from Indiana, and so he fits the victimology of all the other victims so far. 1 year after his death, on August 14th of 1990, 32-year-old Clay Russell Boatman, he was a nurse though, he was not an S-worker. He was on his way to a night out with friends. He had left his house and was headed to a local gay bar in Indiana. However, he never showed up that night, and later his body was discovered in Ohio by some kids. Again, another person dumped over state lines, and his body showed very clear signs of strangulation. 1 month after his death, on September 6th of 1990, 18-year-old Thomas Ray Clevenger Jr. vanished from Indiana, and his partially nude body was found in Ohio shortly after his death, and he had also been an S-worker near gay bars to earn money. 1 year later, on August 6th of 1991, 42-year-old Otto Gary Becker was found in a ditch in Indiana. So this time, he took a victim in Indiana, even though he had been crossing state lines multiple times in Ohio. While investigating Otto's murder, police ended up having several witnesses come forward, and they say that they saw Otto in a car with another male driving north on Interstate 465 near Indianapolis. So we have 13 men and children who have now been killed, and still we have no leads. They do not know who this guy is, but they know he is targeting gay men. And this has now been 11 years of these killings. It's unsolved. We have no leads. We have no answers for these victims or their families and loved ones. Obviously very discouraging and disheartening and scary that there's a serial killer just getting away with everything he's doing. And honestly, like, they started investigating these crimes, but they didn't really put everything together, like all 13 that I told you about, until closer to 1990. It wasn't until 1994 that they were contacted by a man named Tony Harris, and he said that a guy who would often go to the gay bars, and he called himself Brian Smart, had likely killed Tony's friend. Tony says that the reason he thinks that this Brian guy killed his friend was because he had tried to kill Tony with a pool hose during an S-work session inside his mansion after they had met at a gay bar. So the police are like, okay, we should look into this Brian Smart guy. And they end up eventually realizing that Brian Smart is actually Herb Baumeister. So they end up telling him he's a suspect in the disappearances, and they go to his house and they say, can we search your house? And this is when he and Julie say, absolutely not. So they leave and they try to get a warrant, but they aren't able to get a warrant right away. They do get to come back, but it takes some time. In June of 1996, Julie has become like pretty scared of Herb at this point. She is starting to notice her husband's erratic. She's still thinking about that body buried in the backyard, and she's just getting scared, and she ends up filing for divorce. And this is when the police come back, and she gives them permission to search the property this time. And this search was conducted while Herb was on vacation. And when they search the property, they get enough to prove that Herb was a killer. They find the remains of at least 11 men on the property, and they are able to identify 8 of them. So now there's a warrant out for his arrest, and Herb flees to Ontario, Canada, and Herb ends up taking his own life, and he left a 3-page note written on a yellow note paper. He says that he regrets a bunch of things, including his broken marriage, his failing business, but he never mentioned any of the victims or admitted to any crime. So they know that Herb killed multiple different people, and this search has actually been ongoing. So they first looked at the farm in 1996, and they found a ton of different bones, and some of them were charred and burned and broken. And they actually conducted a new search on December 4th of 2022 to go back and look over this farm to see if they could get any more information or can identify anyone else. And they actually were able to find more remains. But only 10 of the victims on the farm have been identified since the initial discovery. 3 of them still remain unidentified, and they are all believed to be male, and it's clear they all were victims of homicide. The Hamilton County Coroner's Office has asked that if anyone in the public had any family members go missing from the mid-1980s to the mid-1990s in the Indianapolis area to complete a DNA test so that they can hopefully identify the remains of the unidentified victims. As of January of last year, 2024, the forensic experts that have worked on this farm have identified nearly 10,000 portions of human remains and bones recovered from, honestly, an unknown number of victims at Fox Hollow Farm. They do not know exactly how many people are on this farm deceased. They do know, however, that there was at least 13, and they know the identities of 10 of them, and I'm going to tell you them. So they discovered John Lee Bayer, who was 20, and he had gone missing on May 28th of 1993. They also identified Jeffrey Allen Jones, who was 31, and went missing on July 6th of that year. And then they discover Richard Douglas Hamilton Jr., who was 20 and went missing on July 31st. Alan Lee Livingston, who was 27 and went missing on August 6th. By the way, that's 3 victims in 1 month. And Alan's remains were discovered in the initial search, but they didn't identify him until October of 2023. Daniel Thomas Holleran, who was either 21 or 22, they aren't entirely sure how old he was. He went missing sometime in March of 1994, and he was identified in 2025. So this year, he was finally identified. Stephen Sperlin Hale was 28, and he had gone missing April 1st of 1994. And then Alan Wayne Brossard, who was 28, went missing on June 6th of 1994. Roger Allen Goodlett, who was 33, went missing on July 22nd, and Michael Frederick Kieran, who was 45, was last seen on March 31st of 1995. Finally, they found Manuel Resendez, who was 34. He was last seen at a gay bar downtown Indianapolis on August 6th of 1993. And that's around the same time that Alan Lee Livingston had also gone missing. He wasn't identified until January of 2024 as well. So we have 10 victims that were identified on his farm and 3 more that are unidentified. So we know for a fact that he has killed at least 13 people. However, none of those people were the people that I told you about at the beginning that initially led them to suspect Herb as a killer. Still have 13 other kills that are completely unanswered, and they do not know who killed them. When we look at timelines, the last victim that I told you about, they discovered in 1991. Herb's first victim that they found on the farm went missing in 1993. So the theory is that Herb is the killer in both of these situations. In both sets of 13 victims, they were targeted because they were gay or S-workers or both. Again, the timeline of the first set of 13 stops, and they no longer are finding bodies in public anymore. But a little while later is when Herb starts abducting people, taking them to his farm, and dumping them there. And so it seems like what was happening is Herb started out with dumping them. After he had bought his farm, he had moved his family on there, and he had been comfortable on the farm. He started to take his victims back to his house whenever his family was gone and kill and dispose of them there. Likely, he was starting to feel like he was going to get caught from all of the bodies that he was dumping in public and being found. And so he thought it was safer for him to dump them on his property where no one was going to look. In total, it seems like Herb has killed at least 26 people, if not more. There is suspicion that he also killed a 34-year-old named Jerry Williams Comer. Currently, his disappearance is unsolved. He was last seen in Indianapolis on August 8th of 1998, and his vehicle was found at the Square Mall after he disappeared. Because he was a young gay man, he fits the victimology of all of Herb's victims, but his remains were never found on Fox Hollow Farm, so they don't really know for sure. It's believed he had anywhere from 11 to 25, if not more, victims, and he would have been killing for at least 15 years, from 1980 to 1995. He's one of the most notorious serial killers in Indiana, and I wish he would have been brought to justice. I wish he would have had punishment and gone to trial and had to answer for all of his crimes, but I am glad that he's no longer on this earth harming any more people, and he probably did so many other things, and we just will never have true answers for those victims or their families.
So the video that I'm about to show you was posted by El Cucuy on TikTok. They post a lot of scary videos videos if you guys want to go check them out. So apparently a security guard that works at a hospital started to record when he saw somebody inside of his car. Check this out.
Estamos en este momento en el microhospital, escuchamos un golpe y nos dimos vuelta porque dijimos, bueno, ¿quién está entrando? Cuestión de que no hay nadie atrás nuestro. Y miramos adentro del auto y dijimos, oh, ¿ves el auto? ¿Qué mierda es? Lo peor de todo es que no queremos salir. O sea, no, un miedo, la puta madre. Lo peor de todo es que se mueve adentro del auto y no hay nadie. O sea, ahora vamos a ir a controlar el auto. Pero parece como si fuese un reflejo.
What the fuck, it is moving.
La puta madre. No, huevón.
I'd be walking home that day because I would not be driving my car anywhere.
Ya, salimos rápido para que vean que no es mentira. Mamá, la piel de gallina, hermano. Piel de gallina. Cagazo.
Oh my god, he opens
Nadie.
the car.
Nadie. Yeah. Nadie.
Where is this hospital at? Because the hospital itself is already creepy as hell. What the hell?
Un montón.
Please don't tell me it pops up right now.
Es un montón. Mierda.
You could see the lines from like the top port. Even if we think about that thing being at the top, it's still a little bit creepy, I think.
Encima nos mira la puta que te parió.
It looks like someone's there. What if it's above him in the top part of the port and not in the car though?
No,
Still scary, but
no.
that's weird. Please don't pop up right now.
Desapareció.
Weird Spooky Gilroy. Sprig Trail in Gilroy looks like any other quiet path, but everyone around there knows it's haunted. Mount Madonna is 4,600 acres of redwood, oak forest, and winding trails between Gilroy and Watsonville. But some of its residents never left. In the 1870s, Henry Miller, the cattle king of California, built a summer mansion in Mount Madonna for his family. And it's where his 8-year-old daughter, Sarah Miller, tragically unalived. Some say she broke her neck, others say the horse fell on her. But every version agrees on one thing, that Sarah never left the mountain. Hikers on Sprig Trail say that they see a little girl in a white frilly dress, sometimes with the horse that unalived her. Campers wake up to tiny footprints and hooves circling their tents. Drivers leaving the park say that they see Sarah trying to hitchhike a ride. And some say they swear they've seen her in the back seat when they look in the rear view mirror. Park rangers themselves admit it. They've heard screams, cries for help, a girl, or sometimes a woman, in white, drifting through the trees. So if you ever hike Sprig Trail and you hear little footsteps behind you, don't turn around. Let me know in the comments if you've ever hiked Sprig Trail, and if you've ever had an experience, let me know in the comments or send me your story.
I will never understand how you can be completely normal your entire life and then one day just snap and kill your entire family. How you can strangle your pregnant wife and then your kids one by one and then dispose of them in remote oil tanks at your work. One thing about this case that has always stood out to me though is this moment right here. It's when police showed up to search Chris Watt's home for his missing pregnant wife. wife and 2 kids. At this point, he had already killed them and knew exactly what happened to them. But as he's being questioned, this commercial pops up in the background. It was a commercial for American Horror Story, which showed a fetus, a woman buried in a shallow grave, and a skull covered in oil at an oil field. I know this is more than likely just a coincidence, but that is exactly how he killed his family. So when it shows up as he is actively being questioned about them is insane, and honestly really creepy. This alone is one of the main reasons I believe in some sort of afterlife, because what are the odds of this happening? It's like someone on the other side was for sure trying to make sure that he got caught. This is the Watts family murders, and trigger warning, because absolutely nothing about this is easy to hear. It's a cautionary tale that I think more people should be aware of, so let's talk about it. This is Chris and Shanann Watts. They grew up in North Carolina and met in 2010, and they very quickly hit it off. Chris seemed like this charming, hardworking guy, and just 2 years later, they were married. By 2015, they moved to Frederick, Colorado, and had 2 beautiful little girls, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, who they called Cece. Chris was working as an oil field operator for a company called Anadarko Petroleum, and Shanann worked from home for Thrive, selling healthcare products and taking care of their 2 little girls. In 2018, they became pregnant with their 3rd child, this time a baby boy who they planned to name Nico. On the outside looking in, they seemed to have a perfect, happy life, but behind closed doors, they had been having relationship and financial problems for years. The Watts had recently filed for bankruptcy and had a lot of debt, and unbeknownst to everyone, Chris had been having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger. According to Nicole, they really started hanging out and going on extravagant dates in June of 2018, and from her understanding, Chris and Shanann had separated. According to her, she didn't know that he was still married, and no one, and I mean no one, could have expected things to escalate like they did. In the early morning hours of August 13th, 2018, Shanann returned home from a weekend business trip to Arizona. She was driven home by her best friend and coworker, Nicole A. And I want to be clear, this is a different Nicole from Chris's mistress. So Shanann was dropped off at home around 1:48 a.m., and this right here was the very last time she was ever seen alive. The very next morning, Shanann's best friend Nicole immediately felt like something was wrong because Shanann missed a really important OB appointment for her baby. That, and she wasn't answering any of Nicole's calls or texts, which was unusual. But panic really started to set in when that afternoon came and went, and Shanann had missed a business meeting with Nicole. So being an angel of a best friend, Nicole drove over to the Watts family home and started banging on the door, but she got no response. She then called Chris, who was at work, and asked her if he knew where Shanann was. Chris was acting a little off-putting on the phone, but he said that he didn't know where she was, and that's when Nicole ended up reporting Shanann missing to the police. Chris rushed home from work, and at around 2 p.m., he was greeted by police wanting to conduct a welfare check on Shanann. But what Chris told them next really shocked everyone. He said that not only did he not know where his wife was, but he also didn't know where his 2 young daughters were either. He told police that the last time he saw Shanann was at 5:15 the previous morning as he was leaving for work, but now he had no clue where his family was. During this entire interview and the body cam footage, you can see how anxious and panicky Chris looks, all while Shanann's best friend Nicole is kind of side-eyeing him. She knew right away that how he was acting was not normal and a huge red flag, and she had no problem vocalizing this to authorities. But Chris gave investigators and even the FBI, who quickly joined the investigation, permission to search his house. It was an incredibly eerie scene because although there was no sign of a struggle, something in the air just felt off, as if time had frozen still. Investigators found Shanann's purse inside the home with her keys and lupus medication, which is something she really needed and would never leave without. Police then found her phone stuffed between some of the couch cushions in the living room. But what's incredibly eerie and would later become critical in this investigation was that Chris and Shanann's bed just so happened to be missing a fitted bedsheet, and Chris had no explanation for why it was missing either. Sitting on the nightstand was Shanann's wedding ring, and in her garage was her car with both Bella and Cece's car seats still inside. So it became very clear that Shanann had not left the house willingly with the girls, otherwise their car seats would be gone too. It's this moment right here though that really sends chills up my spine and gives me goosebumps. It's body cam footage from when one of the police officers were questioning Chris in his house. In the background is their TV, and on it, a really disturbing commercial plays. This commercial ended up being for American Horror Story, but it showed a fetus, a woman buried in a shallow grave, and a skull covered in oil at an oil field, just like where Chris worked. As Chris is shuffling around, becoming more and more antsy, he notices the commercial, and that's when he said, quote, "Oh yeah, Shanann was pregnant too." End quote. No one knew it at the time, but this commercial was heavily foreshadowing the grim and gruesome reality of what Chris had done to his family. And it's also because of this interview right here that has given so many people trust issues. This is one of the many interviews Chris gave to news stations, standing outside of his house begging for his wife's return. Looking back, his body language is pretty much a dead giveaway that he was involved, and he also refers to his family in past tense too, which is really creepy. He was trying his best to come off as this worried dad who just wanted his family home safe, but it wouldn't be long before this fake concern was ripped away. As Chris was brought in for questioning, police went through his phone records, and it was only then that they discovered that he was having an affair. He never willingly brought this up, but once they found out, this kind of spun the investigation in a whole new direction. Chris confessed to having an affair with his co-worker, Nicole, and although she denied knowing that he was still married, according to him, she knew the whole time. Chris was then given a polygraph test, which he failed horribly. Like, he got one of the lowest scores possible, and then he told investigators that he would finally confess, but only if he could talk to his dad first. So police allowed this, and then came his confession. Chris told police that when Shanann got home from her business trip that morning, he admitted to having an affair and told her that he wanted a divorce. And in a blind rage, Shanann smothered her 2 kids, and then he killed her as justification. He told police that he then disposed of their bodies at the oil field where he worked. Meanwhile, authorities were combing through security footage from his neighbor's house, which painted an entirely different story. In the security footage, you can see Chris loading a gas can into his truck and then backing his truck all the way into his garage, which is something he never did. This is when he loaded Shanann's dead body into the truck, and then his 2 daughters, Bella and Cece, who were still alive at this point, contradicting what he initially told police. Police then gave Chris a photo of the oil field and told him to mark the locations where they would be able to find his family. And this time, he didn't lie. When investigators got to the remote oil field 3 days later, they discovered a gruesome scene. There they found Shanann buried in a shallow grave, and their fitted bedsheet that was missing from the scene nearby. It was determined that she'd been strangled to death, and a DRUG was found in her system. And what I'm about to say next is extremely graphic, so be warned. After Shanann was buried, she had a coffin birth, meaning her fetus, baby Nico, and the placenta had partially come out of her and was buried with her, covered with dirt and sand. A coffin birth is a natural phenomenon where a fetus is expelled from the body of a deceased pregnant woman after her death. This happens due to a buildup of gases inside the decomposing body, which increases pressure on the uterus and pushes the fetus out through the birth canal. It can also occur in a coffin or grave setting, which is where the name comes from. The bodies of Bella and Cece were found next, both submerged in separate crude oil tanks. They had been smothered to death, which we later found out was Chris smothering them with a blanket. Their bodies had been pushed through a hatch at the top of the oil tanks, and each lid was only 8 inches in diameter, so extremely small. This meant that Chris had to physically shove them in hard. This was confirmed via the autopsy, as they both had scrapes all over their bodies from this, as well as chunks of hair on the edge of the hatch. After this discovery, Chris was immediately arrested, and since then he's given many stories as to why he killed his entire family. The one story that is kind of stuck and is probably the closest to the truth is that when Shanann came home that night, he did confront her about the affair and wanting a divorce. Chris said that the DRUG that was found in her system was given to her by him, hoping that it would end the pregnancy so that he could be with his mistress easier. He said that while he was strangling Shanann, it looked like she was praying, and then Bella walked in on him. He told her that her mom was sick, and then he tried to strangle his kids in their own beds, but they kept waking back up. So then he loaded Shanann's body into the truck and then forced her babies to sit right next to her, not in their car seats, as he drove them to the oil field. He made them wait in the car as he buried their mom. And when he came back, he said that he used a blanket to smother Cece to death. When it came to be Bella's turn, she asked, quote, "Is the same thing gonna happen to me as Cece?" End quote. And as he took her life, Chris said that Bella's last words were "Daddy, no," as she begged him not to kill her. She even had defensive wounds on her hands. At 4 years old, that is just devastating. Chris later said that whenever he closes his eyes, he can hear Bella's last words, which I hope haunts him forever. So after Chris confessed, he pleaded guilty to multiple charges of first-degree murder as part of a plea deal to get out of the death penalty. This plea deal was supported by Shanann's family, as they didn't want any more deaths, which I can totally understand. innocent. In a split second, they lost one entire family to murder. Chris was instead sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He was then transferred to a maximum security prison in Wisconsin for his own safety. I guess he is not well liked in prison. What's gross is that he has a lot of his family's pictures in his cell, so every day he gets to look at the people whose lives he stole. Since his conviction, so many women have sent him fan mail, basically in support of him. They say he's handsome and misunderstood, which makes me question their intelligence and their eyesight. It's disgusting because he not only receives these letters, but he also sends racy letters back to them. It doesn't change the fact that whenever he's interviewed about his family, his eyes turn black. In 2021, some of those letters were leaked to the public, in which he confessed to even more. He said he'd actually planned the murders for weeks. That's just something I will never get. Why not just leave if you are that unhappy? Why kill everyone in the process? He killed his family to be with his mistress, and now he has neither of them. A lot of people question Nicole's involvement and feel that she knows more than she was letting on. Some even think that she was involved in the actual killings. She has always denied this and has since dropped off the face of the earth. But she did say that in the days leading up to the murders, Chris's behavior completely changed. How involved Nicole was, I'm not sure if we will ever truly know. What really gets me is that the kids show Cocomelon, which my kids watch a lot, actually paid tribute to Bella, Cece, and Nico and named some of its characters after them. It is emotional to watch. It is very scary how a seemingly normal man went a good portion of his life acting sane, and in all regards, loving and charming. And then one day out of the blue, he just snapped and committed one of the worst crimes that I have ever heard of. Chris had no previous history of domestic violence or any criminal record at all. In the days leading up to the murders, Shanann told friends that she was having concerns over her marriage and didn't know if Chris still loved her, even though she loved him so much. She felt that something was not right, but she never thought that her life was in danger. So I guess this is a good reminder that domestic violence can happen anywhere, and it's not a matter of if it will escalate to this point, it's a matter of when. Rest in peace, Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico. I hope that you guys are all together somewhere, living the life that you deserved here.
My daddy is a hero. He helps me grow up strong. He helped me snuggle too. He reads me books. He ties my shoes. If you're a hero, blue and blue, my daddy is love you.
Oh, I love. You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
This is the sign a child held up in a car window. Her only chance to escape during a terrifying abduction. It was the middle of summer 2022 in San Antonio in Texas. A 13-year-old girl was just strolling down the street, minding her own business, having no idea her life was about to be turned upside down. Suddenly she became aware of this car pulling up right by the side of her, and all she could focus on as she looked across was the barrel of a gun aimed at her head. She was ordered, "If you don't get in the car with me, I'm going to hurt you." Obviously she was shaking at this point. She was totally panicked, caught totally unawares, and she didn't want to die, so she did exactly as she was told. Side note, this child was absolutely not to blame for anything that happened to her, but please do be warned, do not ever go to a second location in these cases. If I can educate you guys with my videos on one thing, it's just don't ever go to the second location. You stand more chance of surviving if you start screaming and shouting and running. Make a big scene. The chances are this person is threatening you to try and get you to go to a second location so that they can't be seen doing what they plan on doing to you. The man in the car was Steven Sablan, a fully grown man and pedophile. And as soon as this girl got into the car, he just kept driving and driving and driving. And when the car finally stopped after over an hour, the girl didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. She was like, oh my god, what the hell is going to happen next? Sickeningly, he forced her into the back seat of the car and SA'd her as she cried out in horror. Over 2 agonizing days this carried on. He kept driving and driving and then stopping the car to SA the child and then start driving again. And finally, on the 9th of July, when he pulled over at a laundromat in Long Beach, the child saw an opportunity to escape. She was like, I know that I need to move fast and I need to think quickly. She quickly scribbled the words, "Help me," on a scrap of paper. But she couldn't get the piece of paper to anybody. She was locked inside the car, so she had to hold it up at the window and mime "help me" to the first person that walked by. Thank God this person did see her and was immediately like, what the hell, and rang 911. Officers raced to the scene, arrested Stephen, and thankfully found the missing child. Her poor parents had been absolutely worried sick, and when they found out what their child had been through, they were just absolutely horrified. Inside the car, officers found handcuffs, a BB gun, and a knife. Stephen did plead guilty to this crime. I mean, he'd literally been caught red-handed, but infuriatingly, he was already known to the police. He'd been convicted twice of robbery with a deadly weapon. He's now been sentenced to 35 years behind bars. I mean, that poor child will be left with so much trauma, but just thank God she was found alive. It was a somewhat happy ending.
Between the years 1967 and 1969, there were 7 women that were unalived in the state of Michigan. Now, back in the 60s, there was no DNA testing, so it was really difficult to find the suspect because he was taunting the police. But eventually they did find him, and it's absolutely insane how they were able to catch him. In 1967, there was 2 young boys that were just hanging around when all of a sudden they heard a car door slam. So they went to see what was going on, and they saw the car just speed off. Now, they did not get a good look at the vehicle or the person driving. So they went to see where this person was at, and they could get a really foul smell in this area. So they immediately called the police. When police arrived on the scene, what they had saw was unrecognizable until they saw an ear. So this was a female victim. Her feet were cut off, and also one of her hands, and her head was badly smashed in. She was badly decomposed, and she had puncture wounds along her chest. Around the victim, they did find an orange dress with white polka dots, and it was cut right down the middle. Mary Flezer, who was 19 years old, was reported missing by her roommate. Now, this was the summer of 1967, and a ton of kids, you know, it's summer, they kind of disappear for a few days and then come back. But she had been missing a month, and then that's when they found her body. There was some witnesses that did see Mary in the neighborhood talking to someone in a blue-gray vehicle, and she just shook her head no, and then the person drove off. But then the person circled around, came back and pulled in front of her, and she kept saying, no thank you, and then eventually the person just sped off. But then something happened very odd right before Mary's funeral. So there was a man standing right next to her casket trying to open it, and the funeral director comes in stating, can I help you? And this man asks, yeah, can I open the casket and take a photo? And the director's like, no, you cannot do that. So then eventually the man just took off, went into his vehicle, and sped off. Now, this funeral director was so overwhelmed that he did not get a good description of this man. He did get a look at the vehicle. It was a dark blue vehicle, so they interviewed anybody that had the description of that vehicle, but it seemed like no one was a suspect driving that vehicle. A year goes by with no leads and no suspects. But 20 miles from where Mary's body was found, there was another victim that they found. Her name is Joan Schell, and she was found at a construction site. She had puncture wounds to her chest and also to her back, and she had been SA'd. It appeared that Joan was unalived somewhere else and then dumped here. She's also a student at EMU, and she has dark hair just like Mary does. Joan was on her way to see her boyfriend when one of her friends walked her to the bus stop, but the bus never arrived. So there was a vehicle that pulled up with 3 men inside, and her friend told her, don't go in with those men. But she stated, they seem nice, they're going the same way I am. So she got into the vehicle with these men, and that was the last time she was seen. There was one man in that vehicle that had an EMU shirt, so they decided to bring in anybody that had a certain profile that went to EMU, but it seems like no one knew Joan or had any information. Joan's boyfriend was ruled out as a suspect. He was very distraught about the news about Joan. And Joan and Mary's cases, they were in 2 different jurisdictions, so they were not connecting these cases. And then in March of 1969, Marilyn Skeleton, who was the 3rd victim, was found in a different jurisdiction. So we have 3 different jurisdictions with 3 different victims. And then 4 days after that, a 4th victim was found named Alice Coleman. Police then found the 5th victim, Dawn Basom, and she is a teenager, and she was found just right on the edge of the road. Dawn's face was beaten. She had slashes on her chest and also her stomach, and she was strangled with an electrical cord. Now, near her body, they did find an abandoned farmhouse, so they decided to investigate there. So in this barn, there was a basement, and they did find an electrical cord that was identical to the one that was used to strangle Dawn. So now they're thinking, okay, we've got a crime scene, so we need to secure this area. So for 2 weeks, police are securing this area to make sure no one gets in. But somehow, someone got past the police and burned that farmhouse to the ground. That was the only evidence they had. And then they found in the driveway 5 lilac flowers that were all laid out. So obviously this suspect is taunting the police. Police found another victim, Karen Sue Bindman, and the police had a theory and an idea. So they believe the suspect likes to go back to the scene because there was a person that went to Mary's funeral and tried to get a picture of her. So they're thinking, okay, we will just put a mannequin where they found Karen's body, and we will just have police securing the area to see if this person comes back. So police are in place, and they finally see a lone jogger come up to the mannequin, and they were having trouble communicating something with their walkie-talkies or their radios, and no one was communicating. So eventually that man just took off and no one chased after him, so he got away. Karen was last seen getting on a motorcycle with a man. So she went to a wig store to purchase a wig, and she was making small talk with the owner stating, yeah, I'm doing two things for the first time. I'm buying a wig and also getting on a motorcycle with a man I just met. And the owner was like, I don't think you should do that. I don't think that's safe. And she's like, no, he's a really nice guy. He doesn't seem like he's threatening. And she got on the motorcycle with him. But the owner does remember what he looks like. The owner of the store, she claims that this man did not look like a monster. He was a very good-looking young man. So they decided to interview anybody matching that description that drives a motorcycle. When they came upon one man stating that he did not know Karen and he was working on his bike all day. But they did notice that his license plate was bent, so if police were trying to look at the plate, they could not read it. So they wrote down his license plate, and he does look a lot like the sketch, and they were able to find out that he's a student at EMU as well. So he's involved in a fraternity, so they went to the fraternity house and talked to some of the other boys there and was able to provide a name. They also went to one of this man's old girlfriends and was able to provide a picture, and they confirmed this man's name is John Norman Collins. When they did the autopsy on Karen, they found panties that were inside of her, and they also found hair. Not hair from Karen or from a wig, but it looked like hair that had been cut. When they looked into John's life, he did not seem like the type of person that would commit these horrible, heinous crimes. He came from a very good family. He had a lot of friends. He was getting ready to graduate EMU to be an elementary school teacher, and also his uncle is a state police officer. When the police told John's uncle that his nephew was a suspect in all of these homicides, he got some suspicions because his nephew John had been watching his home and dog watching while him and his wife were on vacation. And when he came home, he noticed some new black paint in the basement. So they went to John's uncle's house and they tested the paint and they did not find any blood, but they did notice some cut hair near the washing machine. And it turns out that his aunt was cutting her son's hair in the basement, and that is a match to the hair that was found in Karen. So they searched John's vehicle, and in his trunk, they did find drops of blood, hair, and also human flesh. So he was arrested and charged in the homicide of Karen. So I believe he was only charged with the homicide of Karen, but he was sentenced to life without parole. And in the year 1979, he was caught trying to escape by tunneling underneath the walls. And to this day, he has been in prison for over 30 years, and I believe he's about 78 years old, and most likely he will die in prison. Now, he never explained why he committed these crimes, but after I was looking up, they believe it was all because of power and control, and he just despised women. He brutally tortured 7 women for no reason. He was a normal, average guy. I mean, he doesn't look like a monster, does he? I mean, he was getting ready to graduate college. He had a nice family. He had friends. He was in a fraternity and sports. It just makes absolutely no sense. Like, why would he do this to these women for absolutely no reason? They were just, either hitchhiking or just walking alone, and he ended up brutally mutilating these women. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. But thank God for those detectives not giving up trying to find this man, because, we did not have DNA testing until the 80s. So, you could only have little evidence. So thankfully, they were able to find evidence to lock him away for life, because he probably would have never stopped and continued doing this. But let me know what you guys thought of this story in the comments. Thanks for watching. I love you all. We'll see you in the next one. And please take care of yourselves.
He could have went on to become one of the most deadly, barbaric, sadistic serial killers. Thank God he was caught when he was, because the 2 murders that he already committed were absolutely horrific. Before watching, please be warned that this is an extremely graphic case. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murders of Christina Benjamin and Brian King. In the early hours of the 27th of July 1993, Father James King would be awoken by a car pulling up to his house, beeping twice and then driving off. A short time later, the tan-coloured car would return and actually parked up outside of his house. This was in Ellis County, Texas. James decided to go down to the front door to investigate, and he would see that his 14-year-old son Brian was talking to the people inside of the car. James decided that while he was awake, he was going to quickly pop to the toilet, and by the time he got back to the front door, both Brian and the car were long gone. He would wait up for around about an hour to see if his son was going to return, and when he didn't, James decided to just roll over and go back to sleep. When he woke up a couple of hours later though, he would discover that not only had his son Brian not returned home, but his stepdaughter, 13-year-old Christina, was also gone. James and his wife Donna, who was Christine's mum, decided not to call the police straight away. They weren't going to worry, they were going to sit and wait it out to see if the children returned back home. However, they never did, and so they were left with no other option but to contact the police to report Christina and Brian missing. 2 days later, police officers that were searching a field in nearby Toledo, Ellis County, would make a horrifying discovery. They found the headless body of a young girl, a girl who we now know was Christina. She was found completely naked, and both her head and her hands had been chopped off, likely to make identification of the body much more difficult. She had been horrifically, sadistically mutilated. She had what was described as an autopsy-like slit down her stomach. She had been disemboweled. Her killer had removed some of her organs, and her remaining internal organs were exposed through the wound. Her private parts had been mutilated, and she had 2 gunshot wounds to her back. Some other officers would continue their search of the field, hoping that they would discover this young girl's head or maybe even her hands, but instead they would find a second body, and that was Brian King, who had been shot at point-blank range twice in his head. I wonder if the killer had done this because they knew that Brian would have done anything to protect his sister. Christina's dismembered remains were never recovered. Through intense investigation and DNA, police were able to narrow down their suspect pool to one person, and that was 20-year-old Jason Massey. Jason Massey had a criminal record about the length of my arm. He was a very dangerous individual, even at the young age of 20. His mother, who had neglected him throughout his childhood, she was an addict, admitted him to a mental health facility after she had read some terrifying entries in his personal diary. He would write about idolizing serial killers, especially Charles Manson, and he wrote about his own aspirations to become a serial killer. He wanted to become a, quote, murder machine targeting young girls, and he even had a list of all of the girls that he wanted to target. Just imagine realizing that your name was on that list. The thought of torturing, mutilating and murdering these young girls would get Jason aroused and excited. This was obviously terrifying to his mother, who knew that he was capable of such evil things. He had already been doing stuff like this for years at this point. Jason was a serial animal abuser. Cats, dogs, cows would be murdered and mutilated by Jason, who kept their skulls as trophies. I think he had around about 21 skulls in his collection. He got into trouble a lot with the police throughout his teen years for the animal abuse, but it didn't stop there. He also had charges for stalking and harassment. One of his old school teachers would report that Jason would write her very detailed letters and would ring her and explain in explicit detail how he dreamt of killing her. In the weeks prior to the murder, Jason Massey had been released from prison after serving an animal abuse charge. In July 1993, when this case takes place, he was out driving with one of his friends when he decided to go to Christina's house. Jason had groomed the 13-year-old girl and convinced her to sneak out one night to meet him, and that is exactly what happened on the 27th of July. Christina would sneak out of the house to meet Jason, and Brian went along with her, and horrifically, just hours later, both of the children would be dead. Jason had actually told his friend in detail what he was planning on doing to Christina. He was going to assault her, torture her, mutilate her, and then kill her. But this friend didn't take Jason's claim seriously because this was the type of thing that he would always talk about. He hated women. And so when he spoke about doing these awful, horrific things, no one thought anything of it. When Jason Massey was arrested, after witness testimony and DNA helped to catch him, he would smile as he was placed into handcuffs. He would go on to be found guilty of capital murder, and it took the jury only 15 minutes to recommend that he receive a death sentence, which he did. He would sit on death row for around about 7 years alongside another infamous serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas. For the barbaric murders of Christina Benjamin and Brian King, Jason Massey would be executed on the 3rd of April 2001 by lethal injection. His final meal consisted of fried chicken, fried aubergine, spinach, broccoli, cabbage, snap peas, fried squash, caramel ice cream, broccoli cheese, and sweet tea. During his final statement, Jason took full accountability for what he'd done and apologised to the family. His statement said in part, quote, "I want you to know I'm sorry for what I have done. I want you to know that Christina did not suffer as much as you think she did. I know you guys want to know where the rest of her remains are. I put her remains in the Trinity River." The river would be searched shortly thereafter, however Christina's remains weren't recovered. After all of these years, it's likely that they have washed far away.
Shish kebab. This guy's dead now. Don't worry, that's a good thing. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Lisa Gray. Viewer discretion is advised. This case happened in Dorsey, which is located in the state of Mississippi. Lisa Marie Gray was born on July 11th, 1983. She lived her entire life in Mississippi. Lisa was described as an incredibly happy-go-lucky type girl. She was just always smiling and laughing and having a good time. Her mother would say that Lisa aspired to become a teacher one day, and that she loved going to her church youth group every week. Lisa loved to sing. She was a part of the school choir. And according to friends, Lisa had no room for bullies, because if she ever saw a friend of hers being bullied by someone, she would immediately stand up for them. She welcomed anyone into their friend group. But sadly, one day, someone decided to take her life in a very brutal way. It was June 22nd, 2000. Lisa did part-time work at her uncle's restaurant, and she worked there that night. She left and said goodbye to everyone. She got into her car and began to head home, but she never got home. As a matter of fact, her car would break down because it had a flat tire. The next day, people would notice a man was lying on the ground, and clearly he was very uncomfortable. When they approached him, he had something carved onto his chest. It was the words, "I'm sorry." He also had both of his wrists cut. They were self-inflicted wounds. A short time after that, the man's van was located, and when they looked inside that van, they found someone stuffed into a folded down seat in the van in this area right here. They found the body of 16-year-old Lisa Marie Gray. She had been reported missing, I believe, that morning. Lisa had been suffocated to death, and she was also raped. The owner of the van and the man they found with the words "I'm sorry" carved into his chest and with his wrist slit was a man named Thomas Edwin Loden Jr. He was a married man. He had a young child, a daughter. Thomas Loden was a recruiter for the Marine Corps. He had joined the U.S. Marine Corps when he was 18 years old. But he did have a history of substance abuse and alcoholism. And after witnessing some of his friends brutally killed in the Gulf War, he was right there when it happened, he began to have social anxiety. He began to distance himself from loved ones. And he had PTSD. Over 1,000 people would attend the funeral of the 16-year-old girl, still wondering why on earth this happened. Thomas Loden was arrested and charged with her murder. Initially, he said he had nothing to do with this. But then he just basically confessed and would end up pleading guilty to the charges. Well, according to Thomas Loden, during this confession, he said he just happened to find Lisa on the side of the road with a flat tire. He said he offered to change her tire for her, and she said, "Okay, of course, please." As he's changing the tire, according to him, he asks her, "Have you ever thought about being a Marine?" And according to him, she said, quote, "No, that'd be the last thing I want to do with my life," end quote. And then he says that made him pissed. He got really quickly angry at that. He then forced her to get into the back of his van. This happened at about 10:45 p.m. Between 10:45 and 2:30 a.m., according to him, he admits to repeatedly raping her and sexually abusing her. He then strangled her to death after he tried suffocating her, and then he shoved her body in underneath the seat of his van. Even without a confession, the body is found in his van. He is found with the words, "I'm sorry," carved into his chest, and he tried to take his own life. That alone is enough evidence, but the confession just makes it even easier. Thomas Lowden would end up pleading guilty to capital murder. He then requested not to have a jury decide his sentence, but instead the judge. And so the judge said he was to be sentenced to death. Over the years, though, he would appeal the death sentence because he says he got inadequate representation from his lawyers. But appeal after appeal after appeal, he was denied. They determined that his counsel was actually very adequate, and he knowingly and willingly confessed to the crime. And everything he confessed to was exactly what happened. Jesus Christ, every time. Ugh. God, look at those. Ugh. On December 14th, 2022, then 58-year-old Thomas Lowden Jr. was executed. His final words were expressing his remorse for raping and killing Lisa. Then he said, "I love you," in Japanese. His last meal was fried okra, pork chops, baked sweet potato, Pillsbury Grand biscuits with butter and molasses, peach cobbler with French vanilla ice cream, and a Lipton sweet tea. He was executed by lethal injection. Lisa Marie Gray got the justice she rightfully deserved. This woman is pure evil, and she killed someone in, quite honestly, one of the worst deaths imaginable. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Robert Curley. Viewer discretion is advised. Robert Curley, pictured here, was one of 3 siblings. He was born on May 27th, 1959. He was an avid outdoorsman. He especially loved fishing. He was always a very devoted family man. He loved his siblings. He loved his whole family. He was a great guy with a great heart. About as nice of a guy as you could possibly meet. Robert wanted a family of his own. He wanted a wife. He wanted a child. In early 1990, he met a woman named Joanne Chopak. The two of them hit it off. They started dating. And by late 1990, they were married. Joanne, this was her second marriage, and she had a daughter from that marriage. She met Robert. Her daughter was 4 years old. And Robert, he got his wish. He now gets to become a dad and a husband. He was happy. Then 6 weeks after they got married, Robert started getting sick. Robert was doing work as an electrician at this time. When he started getting sick, he and his crew were doing work at a chemistry lab. Robert's sickness started around October of 1990. It was a lot of very painful, like, stomach aches and headaches. His vision got kind of blurry. There was a lot of pain with this. This was going on from like October of 1990 periodically until about May of 1991, when the pain and everything became so much more worse. It became excruciating. This guy was suffering, and nobody could figure out what the hell was going on with him. By the way, this is happening in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I think I forgot to mention that. But in May of 1991, he is hospitalized once again for the same symptoms, but it's just getting worse and worse and worse. The pain is unbearable. By September of 1991, still in the hospital, he is finally starting to get better. After 11 months of this torturous pain that he's been experiencing, finally signs of this finally going away. It didn't. On September 27th, 1991, Robert Curley would end up dying in the hospital after one last sudden surge of torturous pain and illness that came back out of nowhere. His wife, Joanne, decided to take him off of life support. She did not allow his family to be in the room when this happened. She wanted to be in there on her own. They would find out it's because she wanted to watch Robert take his last breath. Not out of love, out of evil and greed. After months of not being able to figure out what the hell was going on, they finally do some very rare tests with his blood and also his hair. Because as your hair grows, you can take little chunks of it and see at a time when someone may have been given some kind of possible poison. This is a very specific test that is not typically run in hospitals, but what they found in his system was very, very high levels of thallium, something that was at a time used in rat poison. When his illness first started, he was doing work at a chemistry lab with his electrician co-workers. So they at first thought, okay, did they do this to him? Did he expose himself somewhere here? When they go to the lab, they test everything. They don't have any thallium there whatsoever. And they never really did. They were able to collect a couple of Robert's thermoses, and using these rare tests, they discovered that there was traces of thallium in all of his thermoses. Someone was putting this in his drink and in his food. Someone was deliberately poisoning him to kill him. Only one other person had access to his food and drink. His loving wife, Joanne. On the day that he had this sudden surge of excruciating pain right before he died, well, Joanne had brought him pizza and beverages. She fed it to him while she was alone in the room with him. It's believed that she had been spiking his food and drink over 11 months with thallium. And after torturing him for 11 months and still him not dying, she finally got fed up and impatient and dosed that pizza and drink with a very, very high level of thallium. Why did she do it? Money. A $300,000 life insurance policy that would be paid to her, which it was, and she spent it, because she's not arrested until 5 years after his death. Also, she was having an affair the entire time he was sick. She is arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. They were going for the death penalty, but she said, if I confess, can I get a lesser plea deal? And they allowed it. I'm guessing this is because they could not physically prove she was the one poisoning him, and so in order for them to know for sure that she did it, they would have to agree to this deal. So basically, she pleads guilty to manslaughter, and she admits in court that she poisoned her husband with rat poison. She gave them the specifics on how she did it. She let that man be in excruciating, writhing pain for 11 months. She tortured her husband for 11 months. Made his insides feel like they were boiling. And quite honestly, it's just one of the worst ways a person could die. And she was given 20 years total. And in 2016, she was released. I hope she sees this video. Hi, you suck, you horrible fucking demon. I hope everyone who is currently in her life knows exactly who she is. He got to murder a person brutally and gets to be free. Did Robert really get justice? Not really. He got some, but not all the justice he deserved.